when there's no longer anxiety or fear present, what is a natural occurrence from what I'm seeing is just a level of confidence, which you could describe as bulletproof. And what makes it bulletproof is that you're creating a level of resilience for whatever circumstance, whatever challenges are going to come up, because there are always going to be challenges, because we live in a world which is just radically uncertain. You can still deal with them from a place of calm and ease, no matter what it is. And sometimes they'll really test you. It will test the ego, it will test everything about what you think you're about. But you'll get back to a place where you're operating from that level of calm and trust in yourself.
So today I wanted to talk about anxiety. I wanted us to talk about anxiety because I feel many people talk about feeling anxious, and some people see that as a big challenge in their life, something to overcome. And obviously, we know about the broad range of anxiety disorder. And as a coach, but primarily as a holistic psychiatrist, I'm always looking to help people with anxiety. And how do I do that? And interestingly, I met someone for the first time a few months ago. I think it was back in summer, called Sam. And then we actually went to the same event, the Ultimate Experience event in London. So that's where I met Sam. And let me just give you a sense of what this guy is about and what he has done so far. So Sam Kukathas is the founder of the Philosophical Coach, which was chosen in 2021 by Brainz Magazine as one of 500 companies and influential leaders who are recognized for their entrepreneurial success, achievements, and dedication to helping others. He trained, worked, and taught philosophy over 17 years at the University of Oxford, London School of Economics, King's College London, Australian National University. He has had the privilege of working with some of the most influential leaders and coaches. He enables entrepreneurs to create bulletproof confidence. I'll come back to the term bulletproof, so that they can overcome the anxiety, stress, and overwhelm and fulfill their visions. His podcast on creating freedom from anxiety has been widely shared for the fresh perspective it offers. His unique approach to trauma has led to clients experiencing freedom from PTSD and sharing that anyone who has trauma or PTSD needs to experience what Sam offers. Hey, Sam, welcome.
Thanks so much, Rani, and thank you so much for the invitation.
My pleasure. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm really well, thanks. Yeah.
So let's talk about anxiety. Let's dive into the topic because I know this is a topic you really enjoy. And the brief conversation we had, you said some things about anxiety that intrigued me. And I said, would it not be interesting if so many people who say, oh, I have got this anxiety disorder or I don't know how to deal with it, they seem to have another, their narrative about anxiety seems to be very different for how you express anxiety and how you see anxiety. And before we go there, philosophy, what does philosophy has to do with anxiety or coaching in general?
At a time when I was dealing with anxiety, like I deal with that anxiety for 28 years, I got a fresh perspective, which allowed me to see philosophy from a different light, a light which was very applicable to the realm of coaching. And it was really about the realm of questioning. And everything which has allowed me to overcome anxiety, depression, trauma has come from this idea of this mode of questioning. And it's constantly bringing the kind of curiosity which is natural to someone who's interested in big questions to every ounce of life. The more we can bring the subtle, question the subtle nuances of our experience, the more we can actually, shape the quality of what life actually looks like. And that's something that I'll talk a bit more about inside of looking at anxiety specifically.
It's very intriguing what you're saying. So you have some lived experience of anxiety yourself, is it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like it was, I have like still kind of memories of when I was in university, and I used to go to an alternative practitioner for healthcare, and they would give me these little pills for anxiety, and they weren't, they look like sugar pills essentially, but I would be getting anxious because I couldn't find the anxiety pills at that time because I felt like I needed them to be okay. And I had a kind of point of view where this was just my lot in life. Like I will always be anxious. And given that I'm an anxious person, how can I manage my life as best as possible?
That's really interesting because when you said if I'm an anxious person, so that's an identity level, like, okay, this is who I am. So that's what I'm picking up from here.
Absolutely. Yeah, it lived for me as an identity. And it was something which was like, there was a real foundational, aspect of me, which it wasn't quite right. Like there was something which I had to deal with, which others didn't have to deal with, at least the way I experienced it back then, before there were conversations around mental health and everyone was talking around the anxiety that they experience.
And was this when you were studying philosophy or way before that?
Way before, from like early age, like probably 3 or 4, up until 31.
Okay, so what was the turning point for you? How did you turn from seeing someone who saw themselves as this anxious guy to suddenly not having the anxiety?
Yeah, I think the turning point was really seeing that identity is created, and how it's created as a child is also completely different to how it can be created as an adult. And if you can see the source of where something comes from, then you can reconcile it, and then you can move forward from that. So, if I look at the work that I do now with someone, if I was going to work with them around the anxiety, what I'll do is I'll get to the root cause of the anxiety, but not just at an intellectual level, at an emotional level. So they'll go back into the experience of the moment. For example, I was working with someone the other day, and I was like, okay, where did he first experience anxiety? And they were talking about when they were applying for university, and they didn't get in to this elite university, and they felt this despair. And that was the first moment where they related to their experience as anxiety. Whereas as a child, because of because the neurochemical which stimulates excitement is also one which stimulates anxiety, norepinephrine, they just related to their experience as a child as excitement. So there wasn't a problem with what they were dealing with. Whereas as an adult or a young adult, they saw this as a problem because this was something they desperately wanted to have and they couldn't do it. And now they were trying to figure out now what. And in that now what despair, that's where they related to that experience as anxiety. And the language of, an adult also comes and relates to it in that particular way. So to actually reconcile it, what happened was we first get him to acknowledge the feelings as they are, as they show up in the body. And then once they are able to create neutrality around that, then it'll help them shift into a new way of looking at that experience. And not just from a reframing, but an emotional and physical reframing. So the way it occurs to them is that whatever story and belief they had about that experience now is no longer what they see in front of them.
Okay, that's really interesting. But how do you go about bringing that neutral zone, or you said that the neutrality? Because people are not just thinking anxious thoughts, they're feeling it, but they're not just feeling it in their head, they're feeling it in their whole body. And for a lot of people, it's not only a few weeks or months. They might have been like that for years.
100%. So that's why, the techniques are essentially an emotional healing technique. That's the kind of work that, to get to the deepest root of where the anxiety lives for someone, what will happen essentially is there'll be some part of their body where they feel this intensity, right? Like we'll look at the statements that they have around when the anxiety first came to be something that they're aware of, looking back now as an adult, and they put that language to it. And so I would go, okay, now I'll recreate the experience for them to try and get them present, and they'll close their eyes and they'll get present to that experience. And then I'll look, okay, where's that showing up in your body? And then they'll say, often it's in the stomach, sometimes it'll be in the throat. If you're feeling constricted or if you're nervous before a speech and you feel anxious, it's not going to be surprising if you feel, that sensitivity in your throat, right? When you have a panic attack, people often have this sensation in their throat. And so this was exactly what we were dealing with. We were going into where the body has kept all of this emotional energy stored, which we've tried to avoid, which we've tried to resist because we feel like it's a problem. So we bottle it down. We just allow it to be. We allow it to be there, but we don't recognize it. And when you don't actually recognize the emotion, you don't recognize the feelings which are there, the feeling of being anxious, it just keeps coming up, right? So it's like that first piece is the actual getting them to a place where they can fully accept and feel, sometimes forgive whatever happened, which created the experience where they feel like there was something wrong with what they did. And so then once you've got them to that place, then there's an opportunity to expand and to create what they want to do beyond the experience of who I am as anxious, or I have anxiety, or I've experienced anxiety.
Okay, wow. Does it all happen within one session, or are we talking about quite a few sessions here?
What I'm seeing is you can resolve a anxiety within a session, but it would be irresponsible to work with someone just for one session, and it's going to depend on the person. So if someone's had anxiety, would regard themselves having anxiety since a small child, there may be a lot of different things to work through. And to create enough opportunity for that to be all integrated and for them to shift in terms of who they're being and how they're operating in life, I work with people for like 6 to 12 months. I don't work with them for one session. And that's just because what you can do in an hour is amazing, but what you can do, in 6 months is just extraordinary.
All right, so let's again slow down and consider the implications, and if someone were to be listening to this and were to be skeptical, because again, I'm thinking of people because as you know, I'm a psychiatrist and I know of people of wide range of traumas, and they have gone through different therapy, and some people are not ready for therapy, and maybe and because they are so wounded by whatever happened in the past. So even for them to sit with the emotion can seem very scary. I mean, I don't know the extent of work you do, but you also said something about PTSD. In your bio, it says someone said if you have PTSD or or anxiety problems, then Sam is the guy to go to. So surely people come to you, but sometimes they're scared. So, and they're scared of reliving those painful and traumatic experiences. Because, and I do know that some people feel re-traumatized when someone, say, for example, they're trying to work with therapy, and the therapist is saying, okay, let's go back to the past. And sometimes they can be re-traumatized because of X number of stuff that happens. So, what makes you so confident that people won't be re-traumatized by the type of work you do?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think what I saw with the people who are dealing with the PTSD is they're already being re-traumatized constantly. So to give you an example of this, person was writing a book. There was a three trilogy book of her life. And so she constantly felt like she had to keep reliving the trauma. And that's what showed up inside of me working with her. It took about 40 minutes for to resolve what she said is like 20 years of therapy, lifted more in that time period. And the important thing is what I was getting a clear kind of guidance to share with her was like, your body's confused. Your body feels like all of this is still happening. And I asked her, does that resonate with you? She's like, yeah. And allowing her to see that, and while she's not in her intellect, but while she's in the awareness, while she's just, being with all the sensations which are coming up, without trying to change anything about it, was what was really allowing her to let go of the story around it and all of what had happened. So in that particular instance, there's very little that I needed to know about the the details of what had happened in the past. What was more important was to look at what is the feeling you have around the fact that this is still there. And by looking at that, then we can get to what is at the root of all of it. And then the intelligence of the body is extraordinary in terms of you can start with something which is very subtle. And yet, if you stay with that experience, people will, let go of things which are much, much deeper than that. Because those emotions, those feelings which haven't been acknowledged, haven't been accepted, sometimes haven't been forgiven, have a history which is way longer than just that thought, which is attached to it. So that's what's essentially being tuned into. And what I'm doing is just creating a safer and safer space for them to be guided and to trust in themselves to allow whatever is there to come up without, getting back into the mind and worrying about why it's there and what's showing up and reliving the trauma, but actually just letting go and just releasing and surrendering to what's coming up.
That's beautiful. Is it some kind of soma work, like body work? Because there are so many different aspects of body work, my understanding is that for many people, we are all caught up in our thinking, right? And if we are trying to process trauma with our thinking, we are creating more and more traumatic thoughts, and it's going to be even overwhelming. But what I'm hearing you say is that you are not so, keen to dig into those stories so much as like allowing people, and you use this beautifully. You said being with the sensations, being with the symptoms, being with the emotion, because they are energy. And I had someone else say exactly that. So they were talking about how when they were helping their clients, and this person was also a coach, is also a coach. So when this person is helping someone else, and it's so easy to get into the stories, but rather than that, like acknowledging the symptoms, the sensations, so to speak, and just allowing them to move around without judging them, without putting a story to that, something shifts in that, and it seems like it might be easier for people to let go of that, and passively then also let go of some of the stories that they have been building around it.
I think that's exactly right. That's what my experience is. And I think that's what makes this work so powerful is that you don't have to get deep into the story. Like, I think generally, the therapeutic approach, we will go much more into a story of what had happened and all of and then that's where it could potentially create the re traumatization. Whereas this is like, no, I want to look at what the actual thing you want to release is. And then, there's some work to be done potentially around getting to what the incident was specifically without you having to necessarily relive it. But it's going to vary as to what's going to be appropriate from person to person. And, for me, it's just got to be, I just trust in what the experience is in front of me and the person in front of me as to what's appropriate. And I allow that to be my guide. So I can see whether sometimes, there is need for them to allow to share something which is coming up in their mind, because sometimes that is what allows them to go deeper into the experience and then to release it. Whereas if they stay in the place they are, then maybe they'll get to a level of acceptance, but they won't get to the level of loving the fact that this thing, the feeling itself is there, because they'll have some association between, if I say to love the feeling, they'll think you meant to love the experience happened to them, which is not what it is at all. It's about sending, an energetic shift to what's going on in the body. So you're no longer holding on to that energy as a negative in you, but it actually starts to be something which goes back to, the chakras of like the heart, and allows you to be centered at the core of what it is to be human, which is to experience peace and love. But we get so far away from that because all of the intellectual thinking that we deal with, all of the noise that is constant in our modern life, brings that out of our awareness. And so we are, stuck from the realm of everything's in a sort of relationship to me. How do I get through this? How do I deal with this challenge? What's going to be the next thing which comes up? There's so much uncertainty. And all of this just creates more and more dis-ease. Whereas this is like, all right, let's just get out of all of that noise. Like, I'll give you another example. Like today, I worked with someone around their frustrations in politics after 30 years. And I just wanted them to get clear, like, what was the frustration? They said it was like having my head against a brick wall, because everything that I wanted to do, there was something in the way of being able to do it. So then once the frustration was released, then I just started to create a vision with them of what they saw in politics. And then they started to share what they saw. And they started to say, like, okay, if this was to be the case, then this is how you could create collaboration in politics. If this was the case, this is how you would create peace of mind. This is what it would look like across parties. And, it was, for me, one of the most extraordinary conversations of my life, because outside of what I do as a coach, my commitment is to, reshape what politics looks like. And this is the way in which I intend to do it. And I now got to see, okay, this is actually possible. So you can use this work in so many different ways. It's really quite remarkable.
Yeah, I remember when we spoke, you talk about two of your, pet, the topics that you're interested in. One is mental health, and one is politics. Now that comes to me. Um, Tell me about the bulletproof confidence. Initially, when I heard it, like, wow, bulletproof. So immediately I could visualize, what it means to be bulletproof. So when I asked you, like, hey, what could the title of this conversation be? You said anxiety to bulletproof confidence. My initial reaction was, what? Is it really possible bulletproof? And then I slowed down and said, okay, actually. And I went to your website, and I came across a term. So I'm sure that is something you work with your clients during coaching. So tell us more about this bulletproof confidence? Is it just like positive thinking or something else?
No. So when there's no longer anxiety or fear present, what is a natural occurrence from what I'm seeing is just a level of confidence, which you could describe as bulletproof. And what makes it bulletproof is that you're creating a level of resilience for whatever circumstance, whatever challenges are going to come up, because there are always going to be challenges, because we live in a world which is just radically uncertain. You can still deal with them from a place of calm and ease, no matter what it is. And sometimes they'll really test you. It'll test the ego, it'll test everything about what you think you're about. But you'll get back to a place where you're operating from that level of calm and trust in yourself. And that's what I have, really developed for me, because it didn't used to be that way, right? Like I used to be anxious, and so I clearly wasn't calm. Whereas now, like no matter the situation, I can always create a sense of calm in what I'm dealing with. And so then when I'm working with others, it's like, all right, how can I help them install that in themselves?
And I guess this is not a quick fix process, is it, Sam? It's like you from feeling anxious that you can't just say, "Come to me, and in one session or two sessions, I'll make your anxiety not only go away, I'll also give you this bulletproof confidence." But I know that people will be desperate for that. It's like the pill. Okay, that's the latest pill in town, so let's pop the pill in, and then come to Sam for a couple of sessions, and that's it. But we know that it also requires work. It requires our commitment to show us, to be able to let go of the stories with time, and also like look at how do we want to, approach life? Who do we want to be? And I think that being conversation is something that I know you're also interested in, because we have been both been to the Ultimate Experience conference, and we have read the book of Being by Amy Hardison. What's the name of the other guy who wrote the book? Do you remember his name? I'm trying to remember. Amy Hardison and
Alan D. Thompson.
thank you, thank you. And so tell me something how you see people, when you're helping your clients as a coach and someone with lived experience, how important is the being aspect to any of the work that you do with people?
It's just so critical, like being emerges when you're doing this kind of healing work. But it's like, how do I create that as a lived experience throughout the day when I'm not in a session with someone, right? And if the focus on the doing in life is what we were all kind of adapted to in virtue of the life that we've had, and it's only by like, all right, like who I'm being in this moment is going to make so much more of a difference in terms of what I actually end up doing. The way a situation looks to me, the frame of reference from which I have, creates the possibility which is in front of me. When I'm experiencing being resigned about something, then it's likely that I'm going to interact with that situation from a place of resignation. If I'm being fearless, for example, then the opportunity is to step into that. Now, it's not that everyone is always going to operate straight away just by like, oh, if I be fearless, then I will become fearless. No, it's a muscle which you build, but it's about really getting that the source of who you are as a human being, how you show up, is all in the being. But everything else is just the actions that you take. But the being is what is going to be the source of the kind of action that you're likely to take.
I come across people who feel that being vulnerable is not good, but we also know that as human beings, we have no choice to be vulnerable from time to time. In fact, when we think we are not vulnerable, then we are putting on all this added bulletproof from the ego, oh, I have got all this bulletproof ego, and then I'm fine. And then people say, hey, how are you doing? I'm fine. And you're feeling anxious, you're feeling terrified. And then we put all these layers of bulletproof, thinking, oh, this is going to, the mind says, put on this bulletproof of, that you're okay. And we go about life doing that. But the more we are also, with this kind of work, when we are being vulnerable and come from a place of ownership, we own that. We know that that's part of human design, to feel vulnerable from time to feel anxious, to feel low, to feel all kinds of things. But even that doesn't mean anything, because ultimately, if at the core we know ourselves as we are not we are not our emotions, we are not this ego, we are not this thinking mind, we are not this body, I guess then we ourselves, and we can guide our patients and our clients to this place of just beingness and explore from that. any trauma or any emotions or anything. And that's the beauty. And I this is why I love the conversation we had. And I thought, because this we have this World Mental Health Day and people are going to talk about mental health, I always love to have a different conversation about mental health rather than the same old. So this is clearly a different one.
Yeah, absolutely, Rani. Yeah, no, it's fabulous to be here and to actually have that chance to offer a different perspective because I certainly found that the conventional perspective, I'm sure it's been helpful for lots of people, but it certainly wasn't for me. And I was ready to kind of go down the route of try the medicine approach, and it was only from being challenged as to like I was dealing with depression at the time. And again, it was closely related to the anxiety that I was dealing with because I was avoiding a lot of things from, perfectionist, fear of getting it wrong, all that kind of stuff, which can happen in the academic circle, or just being someone who's a high achiever. And my brother was saying to me, like, I said, "Oh, Nathan, I think I have depression." And he said, "Where is it located?" I was like, "What do you mean? Where's it located?" And I was like, he's like, "Where is it located?" And I had an intellectual response because I was trying to be smart and I was trying to justify my way of thinking about it. But the question itself was valuable, not because it got me out of the space of depression, for the next few days or months or whatever, but for that moment, I started to look at life from a different place, and it created a space to then start to create what I wanted to do for the next few months. Whereas when I was in the thinking of, no, I have this is just a certainty, there was no space for anything else. So that was the kind of opening for me to go, well, what if? What if I'm wrong? What if it's not the way I think it is? What if there was another way which doesn't require the medical approach that we've been taught or grown up with, or others I see others dealing with, and one of the reasons why I was the least interested in probably going the medical approach is I'd seen so many people in my own field whose lives were miserable, and yet they were relying on the different types of depression and anxiety medicine. And again, I'm sure there are people who it's made a massive difference to, and I don't want to discount that as a possibility. But it wasn't an appealing possibility for me, seeing what it looked like for the people that I cared about.
No, this is beautiful. Thank you. I think we are exploring opportunities here, isn't it? So people might, if people don't know about this, they might think, oh, the medical model or going down the drugs route or only going down the CBT route is there's only this many possibilities. But you are a living proof of someone who used to be anxious, who have try different approaches and everything, and ultimately you have come to not just terms with it, but you have like changed from anxiety to have this bulletproof confidence. Not just that, and I don't see the confidence as arrogance. When you say bulletproof confidence, it's just like knowing who I am, that kind of confidence. That's what I'm hearing from your bulletproof confidence.
For sure, like it's not about arrogance, absolutely not. It's really about being able to like having that clarity. I can handle anything which comes at me. Like there will be days where the challenges are big. Like I had something coming up a couple of weeks ago, and I didn't really know how to handle it at the time, and I had to get recentered and and get that trust back. And it took me a few days in that instance because it was something which was bigger than anything I'd kind of anticipated. And I'm not going to try and explain what it was, but it just really threw me for that little bit of time. And then the thing which got the confidence back was just having an extraordinary session with someone who was dealing with anxiety because they were afraid that if they reached out and there was silence, that would be a failure. And they got to see like that had been the way life had looked since they were a child, and they'd created that way of being ever since. So even though they were confident in certain areas of life, this was an area where they didn't have that confidence. And by the time that conversation had finished, they then just like they had a clear, not just the confidence to go and reach out to policymakers about what they wanted to do, they had a completely different vision for the project that they were doing. And they hadn't seen it that way before because it wasn't just about creating the confidence. We're now going to create you as in terms of your expansion of self in this moment. I'm just going to hold the space, the energetic space for you to expand and to start to allow the trust in, which is in the way of the confidence, which is really there underneath.
Beautiful. So, any final tips or any parting advice for people who are listening and who might be experiencing anxiety?
I think the first thing I would share is like anxiety itself is not the problem. It's the relating to it as an identity and as something that you have, which makes it a problem. Of seeing the anxiety as if it's a problem rather than just a natural different state of being that we all experience at different times is what helps keep it alive. And the more you refusal to acknowledge all you're experiencing, the more you're going to experience more of it. It's very easy to understand conceptually what resist persists, but it's literally phenomenologically what is going on when it comes to keeping anxiety alive. And then if the most people who are dealing with anxiety, they avoid the very thing which is keeping the anxiety alive. So whenever you're like, oh, I don't want to do that. I like to avoid things. Well, great, you can do that, and you can see what life looks like. Or you can say, well, what if I just chose today to take on that thing that I've been avoiding? And then if tomorrow you did that, what if I chose today to take on that thing that I've been avoiding? A friend of mine, Jason Goldberg, used to call for this just for today. And I think you can use that philosophy if you're trying to build a new habit around anxiety. Judd Brewer has a book called The Habit of Anxiety because he says anxiety is just a habit. It's no different to anything else in that respect. We create it in our minds as if it must be something bigger than that. But if it's just a habit, then you can adapt new habits.
Oh, wow, wow. We mentioned that creating a way of being, and perhaps very innocently, we have been creating a way of being that stuck with us for some time, and it could be anxiety, anxious way of being, or whatever, a low confidence state of being, or anger way of being, or whatever it is. And we also have this gift to recreate our beingness and operate from another way of being. I just love this conversation, Sam. It's been amazing. It's been very rich. It definitely offers people a fresh perspective into anxiety, and I'm so excited that this is going out on World Mental Health Day because I want people to hear a different message about anxiety. So thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, my absolute pleasure, Rani. It has been absolutely wonderful to spend this time with you, and I hope it's been valuable for your audience.